Welcome to Scotland, a country often considered the most beautiful in Europe. Scotland's nature is not only majestic, but also astonishingly diverse. Vast, empty highlands exist alongside quiet, ancient forests. Wind-swept cold fjords meet gentle lochs, resting within deep green landscapes. Across this scenery, history leaves clear traces through old battlefields, isolated monasteries, and small towns that continue to exist under harsh conditions. Offshore, distant islands emerge through mist, where sea, stone, and cloud merge into a landscape that feels almost unreal. Now is the moment to step into Scotland, where the beauty of Europe reveals itself fully through nature, history, and emotion. A city built on the height of stone and the depth of history. Edinburgh holds a rare position among European capitals. Here, power, scholarship, and everyday life stand layered within the same urban space. Located on the east coast of Scotland, facing the North Sea, the capital grew around an ancient volcanic rock that formed a natural foundation for the city. History remains visible through fortresses, cathedrals, and academic buildings where Enlightenment ideas once shaped Europe. New town districts extend outward with straight avenues, open squares, and symmetrical architecture, creating a clear contrast with the dense medieval fabric. Sea winds carry a cold breath across the hills, sweep along the Royal Mile, and slip into narrow closes and shadowed alleys. The city moves between past and present, between the stillness of stone and the motion of human life. In Edinburgh, every house, street, and neighborhood preserves a fragment of Scotland's memory. Standing atop an ancient volcanic rock, Edinburgh Castle looks directly down upon the Royal Mile and the entire city of Edinburgh. The fortress served as the central military and royal stronghold of Scotland for many centuries. Its thick stone walls cling tightly to the edge of steep cliffs, where strong winds sweep through open air, and height dominates the landscape. From the main gate, a narrow passage leads inward to the central courtyard, former barracks, and old armories. At the heart of the courtyard rests the cannon Mons Meg, lying silent as a surviving trace of medieval warfare. The cannon impresses through its massive scale and rough metal body, once used to breach fortified walls during the 15th century. Within a secured chamber, the Scottish crown, sceptre, and ceremonial sword are displayed separately. These regalia embody royal authority and the legitimacy of successive Scottish monarchs. At Edinburgh Castle, the history of Scotland remains inseparable from the control of height, used to observe, defend, and endure across generations. The Isle of Skye reveals Scotland at its wildest, where the sea drives straight into the heart of Rocky Mountains. The Isle of Skye lies off the northwestern coast of Scotland, connected to the mainland by a narrow bridge. Here, ancient landforms are fully exposed, shaped by volcanic forces, glaciers, and the cold Atlantic Ocean. The landscape shifts rapidly over short distances. Jagged mountain ridges rise abruptly with fractured slopes, then quickly give way to narrow valleys, where the ground remains constantly damp. Coastal cliffs are relentlessly eroded by waves, forming sharp and irregular rock shapes. Light arrives low and at an angle, causing stone surfaces to shift from lead grey to deep blue-black within minutes. Skye's ecosystems are finely adapted to strong winds and thin soils. Low grasses cling tightly to the ground to avoid being torn away. Mosses and lichens blanket exposed rock surfaces. Seabirds nest on high outcrops, taking advantage of steady air currents. Red deer move along mountain slopes, accustomed to steep terrain and rapidly changing weather. The Isle of Skye does not cater to gentle visual comfort. Its rugged terrain, persistent winds, and swift weather shifts keep the landscape raw, demanding, and uncompromising. With rows of colorful houses standing close to cold water, Portree feels like an anchor set within the surrounding wilderness. The town lies on the eastern coast of the Isle of Skye, facing a narrow bay that is naturally sheltered. It is the largest settlement on the island and serves as a gateway for journeys spreading across Skye. Cliffs encircling the bay hold the wind higher above, allowing the water below to move slowly. Rows of houses painted blue, yellow, and red step down the slope, standing out against grey rock and low cloud. Compared to other exposed coastal villages on the Isle of Skye, Portree feels warmer and more approachable. In the morning, fish are brought straight from boats to shore, leaving a familiar scent of salt along the wooden pier. As afternoon fades, residents gather briefly for quick trade, then return home. In the evening, pubs light up early. Locals share drinks while talking about weather shifts and daily prices. Portree does not soften the wild nature of Skye, but it shows that Scotland still makes space for human life amid a land shaped by wind and stone. Loch Ness stretches along the Great Glen Fault, running through the heart of the Scottish Highlands. With its great depth and continuous length, Loch Ness holds one of the largest volumes of fresh water in the British Isles. The lake carries a persistent sense of mystery and cold. Its surface remains dark due to peat and dissolved sediments, preventing light from reaching the depths. The shoreline is narrow and steep, with forest and mountain slopes pressing tightly against the water. Mist often drifts low across the surface, blurring the boundary between water and air. Loch Ness is tied to oral traditions passed down through generations in the Highlands. The most famous tale centers on a large creature said to dwell beneath the dark water, commonly known as Nessie. In 1933, a married couple reported seeing a long-bodied form surface briefly before sinking back into the still lake. That account triggered decades of sightings, photographs, and sonar explorations at Loch Ness. Although no scientific evidence has confirmed its existence, Nessie remains embedded in collective imagination. For local people, the story is not about proving truth or falsehood. It underscores the depth, the cold, and the unpredictability of Loch Ness, reminding humans of the limits of their understanding. Inverness lies in the far north of Scotland, at the mouth of the River Ness, serving as the central hub of the Scottish Highlands. From here, roads radiate toward deep lochs, narrow glens, and the cold northern coastline. The River Ness flows straight through the town, its dark and steady surface forming a continuous visual axis across the urban space. Inverness Castle stands on elevated ground, overlooking the river and the lower residential areas below. Inverness preserves clan history and the memory of past battles embedded within a compact urban setting. Local museums safeguard weapons, garments, and records of Scottish uprisings, most notably the Battle of Culloden nearby, where the traditional clan order collapsed. In contemporary life, the people of Inverness maintain a measured relationship with land and history. The past is not displayed loudly, but preserved through architecture and modest local festivals. The Scottish Highlands stretch across northern Scotland, where ancient mountain ranges, deep glens, and long lochs shape the country's entire geography. Rather than centering on a single dominant peak, the Highlands form a continuous mass that has influenced climate, movement, and daily life for centuries. Narrow valleys open between mountain slopes. Hillsides are covered with coarse grass and moss, their colors shifting quickly under changing light. Roads climb over high passes and then drop abruptly, revealing pockets of landscape that remain largely untouched. The Scottish Highlands create a sense of vastness for the traveller, where distance is measured not in kilometres, but in wind and light. The culture and history of the Highlands emerged from long isolation from the urban centres of southern Scotland. High mountains, deep lochs, and poor soils forced communities to rely on herding, hunting, and strong self-sufficiency. Over centuries, Highland clans developed their own social order, rooted in land, honor, and inherited memory. Ben Nevis rises on the western edge of the Scottish Highlands, near Fort William, emerging from an open and exposed landscape. With a height that clearly exceeds the rest of the country, Ben Nevis stands as the most recognizable physical landmark on the map of Scotland. Its slopes spread wide and climb gradually, rather than rising sharply from the base. Grass thins with altitude, giving way to a rough and cold mountain surface. Snow can appear suddenly, even when lower regions are already in the warm season. Footpaths leading to the summit have been used for generations, linked to climbing, scientific observation, and mountain rescue. Local communities view Ben Nevis as a reference point for weather and terrain. The mountain receives moist Atlantic winds directly, causing cloud, rain, and snow to form earlier than in surrounding areas. For local people, Watching Ben Nevis helps predict travel conditions, grazing patterns, and daily activity, turning the mountain into a natural measure more reliable than any weather forecast. The wind shifts direction very quickly. The ground suddenly opens wide. Located in the eastern Scottish Highlands, Cairngorms National Park covers the largest and highest mountain mass in the country. Unlike narrow valleys, Cairngorms National Park creates a sense of breadth and continuity, where the land stretches instead of pressing inward. High plateaus lie at great elevation, covered with gravel, coarse grass, and cold-tolerant moss. Mountains here have rounded summits and gentle slopes rather than steep faces, allowing wind to sweep across without obstruction. The ecosystem of Cairngorms National Park is one of the rarest mountain systems in Europe. Ancient Caledonian pine forests survive in scattered pockets, marking the last remnants of the primeval woodland that once covered the Highlands. Reindeer move freely across the high plateaus, adapted to long winters and persistent winds. Birds of prey nest on open slopes, relying on vast open space to hunt effectively. At Cairngorms National Park, Scotland preserves a natural landscape where life can function freely without being confined by narrow boundaries. Red deer in Cairngorms National Park represent one of the clearest expressions of Scotland's wild character. This large native mammal has lived in the region for thousands of years, occupying open plateaus, ancient pine forests, and cold mountain valleys of the Cairngorms. Red deer have tall bodies, upright posture, and constantly alert eyes. Their coat changes with the seasons, becoming darker and thicker in winter to retain heat. Males carry large antlers that fully develop during the breeding season and are shed afterward, leaving a clear trace of a biological cycle closely tied to Highland weather. When autumn arrives, the deep calls of stags echo across open hillsides, creating one of the most distinctive soundscapes of Cairngorms National Park. Red deer feed on grasses, young shoots, and low vegetation, helping regulate plant growth and maintain open landscape structure. The vast space and harsh climate have shaped a population with strong adaptive abilities, distinct from red deer living in lower regions of Europe. At Cairngorms National Park, the golden eagle stands as the undisputed ruler of the open sky. From high above, it controls valleys and mountain slopes at the same time. Golden eagles live alone or in bonded pairs, each maintaining a vast territory that can span dozens of square kilometers. They have a wingspan of about 2 to 2.3 meters. Their eyesight is extremely sharp, allowing them to detect prey from great distances across open terrain. Powerful talons enable them to seize and subdue prey with speed and precision. In the wild, a golden eagle can live for more than 20 years. When soaring at high altitude, the bird appears almost motionless in the wind, making only subtle adjustments to maintain position. Its prey includes mountain hares and other birds. The final dive is fast, decisive, and rarely misses its target. Golden eagles also feed on carrion, using every available source of energy in the cold Highland environment. Their continued presence shows that Cairngorms remains wild enough to support an apex aerial predator at the top of the ecological hierarchy. The land splits apart, water fills the gap, and the Scottish Highlands are divided in two. Great Glen is a major geological fault, stretching from Inverness to Fort William, cutting straight across the Scottish Highlands. This valley formed along a large fracture in the Earth's crust, where ancient rock masses slid past one another over hundreds of millions of years. That process created a deep, narrow, continuous corridor linking long lakes such as Loch Ness, Loch Lomond, and Loch Lomond. The landscape of Great Glen carries a strong sense of order. Mountain slopes on both sides rise in relatively even lines, showing the stability of the underlying bedrock. Exposed rock here is mainly ancient metamorphic stone, its surface smoothed by glaciers during the most recent ice age. Glacial traces remain clear in the U-shaped valleys, steep lake shores, and polished rock faces. Long, still lakes rest within the valley floor, reflecting the subdued light of the Highlands and emphasizing the depth of the terrain. Great Glen does not impress through towering peaks or sheer cliffs, but through the clarity, continuity, and precision of its geological structure. Running along the length of Great Glen, the Caledonian Canal is a man-made waterway linking Inverness with Fort William, connecting the chain of Highland lochs into a single inland route. Completed in the 19th century, the Caledonian Canal works with the natural fault line rather than resisting it. The flat surface of the canal stretches between high mountain slopes. Loch Ness, Loch Lomond, and Loch Lomond become natural sections of the route, where water widens and narrows again. The Caledonian Canal softens the landscape of Great Glen through its slow, steady movement. Lochs regulate water levels gradually, lifting boats across changes in elevation without disrupting the surrounding space. Around the lochs, small villages developed, where daily life follows the familiar rhythm of rising water and steel gates opening and closing. Loch keepers balance technical work with conversation, exchanging words with sailors and travelers passing through. Inns, small shops, and boat repair yards cluster along the canal banks, serving journeys that move slowly through the Scottish Highlands. The Caledonian Canal does not transform local life. It preserves everyday rhythms, keeping communities connected to water and the Highland landscape. Leaving the Caledonian Canal behind, the land north of Inverness opens into a very different kind of emptiness. Culloden Battlefield lies across this open field. There are no cliffs or structures to block the view, only bare ground holding a heavy memory. In 1746, the Battle of Culloden took place here and ended in less than 1 hour. The Jacobite forces were defeated by the British government army, leaving more than 1,500 dead scattered across the cold grassland. The defeat brought the Highland clan system to a complete end, dismantling local power and authority. Culloden Battlefield therefore stands as a historical point of closure. Today, the battlefield remains wide and largely unchanged. There are no fortifications or monumental structures, only open space that exposes history without mediation. Small stone markers are set into the ground, each marking the place where individual clans fell. A narrow path cuts across the field, guiding visitors through the zones where the fighting unfolded. In the past, Culloden Battlefield marked the destruction of clan power. Today, it reminds us of the cost of centralized authority and the erasure of local community structures. Glencoe does not seek to overwhelm. Steep cliffs rise and close in around the valley, concealing a distant and painful memory. The sheer rock walls hold the valley in an almost enclosed state, allowing light to reach the ground only in narrow slices during the day. Mist lingers for long periods, darkening the stone and blurring the boundary between near and far. Within Glencoe, space seems to press downward, creating a weight that is difficult to explain. This valley is bound to one of the bloodiest tragedies in Scottish history. In 1692, the massacre of the MacDonald clan took place here. It began with a cold political order, after the MacDonalds were judged to have delayed their oath of loyalty to the new crown. A group of soldiers was sent to winter in the valley. For days, they ate, warmed themselves, and were treated as guests in MacDonald homes. Then, on a fateful night, the soldiers turned on their hosts and killed members of the MacDonald clan as they slept in their beds. The tragedy of Glencoe remains a heavy memory carried through generations in Scotland, where hospitality is held as a sacred value. On a solitary island off the western coast of Scotland, Iona Abbey exists as a religious centre whose influence reached far beyond the island itself. From an early period, the monastery served as a starting point for missionary activity, leaving a spiritual and historical imprint far greater than its modest scale. Founded in 563 by Saint Columba, Iona Abbey marks the beginning of Christianity in Scotland and much of northern Britain. From Iona, monks crossed the sea to spread their faith, laying the foundation for a network of belief that extended across the islands. The abbey was built of stone, with thick walls and a restrained exterior. The main church follows a straight axis, allowing just enough light to soften the interior space. For centuries, Iona Abbey became a burial place for kings of Scotland, Ireland, and Norway, giving the site a rare sacred status. Today, Iona Abbey serves as a spiritual meeting place for those seeking stillness in a fast-moving world. Standing on the cold stone of the abbey and listening to the steady rhythm of the waves, one understands that some beliefs endure for centuries through quiet persistence alone. On a rocky headland thrust straight into the northern coast of Scotland, a castle rises in isolation from the mainland. This is Dunnottar Castle, a place where power once stood at its height amid stone, sea wind, and open sky. The complex sits tightly on a promontory, with sea on three sides. Broken walls, hollow watchtowers, and exposed floors lie open to rain and wind. The only access is a narrow path cut along the cliff, forcing every step to slow and remain deliberate. Inside, spaces that once hosted crucial ceremonies now retain only the bare traces of grey stone. Medieval records describe Dunnottar Castle as a strategic stronghold along the east coast of Scotland. In the 17th century, the castle became a hiding place for the Scottish crown jewels during conflict with English forces. These royal treasures include the crown, the scepter, and the ceremonial sword, symbols of sovereignty and royal legitimacy in Scotland. Long sieges, hunger, and punishment unfolded here, shaping Dunnottar Castle into a symbol of resistance rather than victory. When its military role ended, the castle was abandoned and gradually absorbed into the layered silence of time. Leaving Dunnottar Castle behind, the journey no longer follows the memory of ancient stone. The road turns northward, toward a Scotland that opens into a sparser and colder space. North Coast 500 is a circular route stretching over 800 kilometers, beginning and ending in Inverness, tracing the entire northern edge of the Scottish Highlands. This is the least populated region of Scotland, where the land meets the North Atlantic directly. Wheels roll across open plateaus, where low grass endures constant wind throughout the year. The landscape shifts continuously between bare rocky hills, deep bays, and headlands thrusting straight into the sea. To the west, dark water presses tightly against mountain slopes. To the north, pale, sandy beaches appear briefly between fractured bands of rock. Light changes quickly under low clouds and strong winds, casting alternating bands of shadow and brightness across the road. Stone castles stand alone on headlands, then disappear again beyond the next curve. Compared to inland routes, North Coast 500 offers richer visual transitions, but far greater emptiness. North Coast 500 is not designed for speed. It forces travelers to slow down, to observe each stretch of coastline and each small town, and to understand that here, the journey matters more than the destination. At Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park, water, forest, and mountains merge into a rhythm very different from the empty high plateaus of the far north. The park lies on the southern edge of the Scottish Highlands. This is a clear transitional zone, linking the moist Atlantic climate with the colder Highland terrain farther north. Loch Lomond spreads out as a broad and calm body of water, reflecting low mountain ridges covered in mixed woodland. More than 30 small islands are scattered across the loch, breaking the surface into fragments and causing the scenery to shift constantly with each change of viewpoint. To the north, the land rises gradually into darker, rockier slopes. To the south, the terrain opens into softer valleys and damp grasslands. Oak, birch, and ancient pine forests form a dense canopy, retaining moisture in the soil and softening the light that reaches the forest floor. Thin mist often hangs low in the early morning, blurring the boundary between water and trees. Biodiversity here is sustained by the continuous structure of loch, islands, and forest. Red deer move along forest edges at dawn. Otters use low rocky banks as hunting routes. Waterbirds nest in small bays, where currents are weak and vegetation is thick. Loch Lomond and the Trossachs reveals a gentler Scotland, where nature does not assert power loudly, but quietly preserves life through persistence. The wind never stops. The land falls far away. St. Kilda stands outside every familiar rhythm of Scotland. This remote archipelago lies far out in the Atlantic Ocean, completely separated from the mainland. Sheer rock islands rise straight from cold water, their surfaces constantly eroded by strong winds and sea salt. The landscape is so exposed that every movement becomes visible. Low clouds race across the sky, and light shifts rapidly, turning the rock from lead grey to deep brown within a single afternoon. A human community once lived here, then withdrew, allowing nature to reclaim the entire space. Old stone houses are scattered across the slopes, with collapsed roofs and grey walls saturated with sea salt. The ecosystem here follows a harsh logic. Seabirds occupy the central role within it. Gannets, puffins and fulmars blanket the cliffs, using every narrow ledge for nesting. Layers of accumulated guano create rare pockets of nutrients that sustain low grasses and clinging moss. St. Kilda reveals a severe side of Scotland, neither gentle nor accommodating. Here, nature exposes its raw strength, leaving only faint traces of human presence behind. Regarded as one of the most important ancient forests in Scotland, Glen Affric lies in the western Scottish Highlands, stretching between low mountain ranges and freshwater lochs. Its enclosed terrain shields the valley from strong Atlantic winds, creating a calm and humid environment. Scots pine trees grow sparsely, tall and straight, allowing sunlight to fall in distinct patches onto a thick, mossy floor. Beneath the canopy, ferns and woodland grasses grow slowly, retaining moisture and keeping the soil consistently soft. Long, narrow lochs rest within the valley, reflecting forest and clouds, causing the landscape to shift subtly hour by hour. Compared with the open, windswept Highlands, Glen Affric reveals greater depth and shelter. Red deer move along forest edges in the early morning, grazing on young grass that emerges from natural clearings. Golden eagles use rising air currents along the slopes to glide high above, surveying the entire valley below. The River Affric flows slowly through the forest, maintaining stable temperatures that support salmon growth. Decaying wood and fallen trees provide refuge for insects and fungi, sustaining the lower biological layers of the ecosystem. At Glen Affric, forest restoration projects prioritize allowing ecosystems to recover naturally. Human involvement remains minimal, focused on observation and documentation, with intervention only when necessary, ensuring recovery unfolds slowly and in balance with the valley's natural conditions. The journey through Scotland comes to a close amid grey stone, cold winds, and layers of time pressed into the natural landscape. Highlands, distant islands, deep lochs, and ancient cities come together to form a beauty born from depth, not from spectacle. If this journey has sparked your curiosity about places that are rarely spoken of, subscribe to Planet Vista 4K and continue exploring with us. Thank you for watching, and see you again on the next journey.